Hi, this is a review of the movie Attraction, which into this I didn't realise it was a Russian movie, but it was a moderate, better than standard sci-fi movie all in all. I got lost in the plot about 3/4 of the way, just slightly, but not entirely. Overall, there's a few things that stood out I thought was kind of interesting that I'll get into. Okay, where to start? Okay, the first thing was, and let's talk about the technical specs and visual effects, shall we? First thing, when I first saw this, the trailer suggested it was IMAX exclusive, but I realised that it was a conversion and it wasn't actually. It doesn't seem like it was filmed with IMAX cameras, because it says the project became the 4th Russian film transferred to 3D IMAX. So it was a transference. It wasn't properly filmed with IMAX. And I did see it in the standard cinema, and it was pretty decent for what I saw. So this came out on 26th of January last year in Russia, grossing 1 billion rubies. I'm not sure how much rubies are in British or American. It was interesting, on the main site it had the two main, I thought it was kind of interesting that the two main countries that actually had this as official website was Russia and Japan. I thought that was kind of interesting. So it was inspired by the. Sorry if I'm not pronouncing this right. By the Byrial Yovel riots of 2013. So this was inspired by these, I guess, Russian riots. On the 13th of October 2013, the riots broke out in Moscow's southern Byrial-Yovel district after it was announced that Igor Sheverdakov, a 25-year-old man, was killed allegedly by a migrant who might have come from Central Asia or the Caucasus. I'm not sure where the Caucasus is. On the 10th of October, the footage of the man being stabbed was circulated in the news. The previous day, some 40 people gathered to demand justice. The police announced a reward of 1 million rubies, which is $30,000, little over $30,000, for any information about the suspect. The riots turned violent and protests. A mixed crowd of nationalists and localists attacked the properties owned by immigrants. On the 14th of October, the police arrested more than 1,200 immigrant workers, where the killer allegedly left. So a day later, Arkan Vayonalas and Azerbaijan citizen was arrested as a suspect for the killer Igor in... Okay, not far outside from Moscow. Okay. It kind of brings a message. It was very reminiscent of the final bits of the 1951 movie The Day the Earth Stood Still. At the last bit of the movie, when he talks about how humanity has to get more secular, more, empathic before humanity has to come together as a whole and stop having wars and things so that they can be aligned with the rest of the universe, or more. And it was like a natural development of human development. Because that reminds me of Michio Kaku from the from New York University. At the current time, humans have not yet reached Type 1 civilization. This is Michio Kaku's words. Physicist and futurist Michio Kaku suggested that humans may attain Type 1 status within 100 to 200 years from now. Type 2 status in a few thousand years, and Type 3 status in 100,000 to 1,000,000 years. And that kind of does play onto the scenario of this movie, because the alien that crashed, this was a movie, a deliberate movie, in the sense that the only reason this movie happened is because of an accident, right? That made the alien crash into the Earth, because all he was doing was observing and taking analysis and data, right, without us knowing, as supposed to know. Which for a far superior race, you would think they wouldn't let that happen. You would think they would have deflectors for meteors and things. So this was 2008.
When physicists look in outer space for alien life, we don't look for little green men. We look for Type 1, Type 2, and Type 3 civilizations. A Type 1 civilization has harnessed planetary power. They control earthquakes, the weather, volcanoes. They have cities on the ocean. Anything planetary, they control. That's Type 1. A Type 2 civilization is stellar. They've exhausted the power of a planet, and they get their energy directly from their mother star. They just don't get a suntan on a weekend. They use solar flares. They use the power of the sun itself to energize their huge machines. Eventually, they exhaust the power of a star, and they go galactic. They harness the power of billions of stars within a galaxy. Now, for example, Buck Rogers would correspond to a Type 1 civilization, a planetary civilization. Star Trek and the Federation of Planets, who have colonized the two-star systems, would correspond to a Type 2 system. And the Empire of Star Wars would correspond to a Type 3 civilization. Now, what are we on this scale? We are Type 0. We don't even rate on this scale. We get our energy from, not from stars or galaxies, we get our energy from dead plants, oil and coal. But we can calculate when we will attain Type Type 1 status in about 100 years. Now, every time I read the newspaper, I see evidence of this historic transition from Type 0 to Type 1. And I am privileged to be alive in the most important era in the history of the human race, the transition from Type 0 to Type 1. I read the newspaper, and I see evidence of this everywhere.
In another video, he states that Type 1 are more closer to being immortal, which is kind of interesting, which is what the movie of the alien of Attraction was based on, because his entire civilization was immortal, but can still be killed. Which is basically, yeah. But we will probably never reach Type 1 if we don't let go of certain things of human nature that I have a good feeling what it is. But yeah.
What is the European Union? The European Union has been formed to oppose NAFTA, that is, the United States, Canada, and Mexico. But why? Because we're seeing the beginnings of a Type 1 economy. Huge planetary trading blocks are the beginnings of a Type 1 economy. And what language will this Type 1 economy speak? Everywhere I go around the world, I find that the elites all speak English as a second language. In the future, the planet Earth will be like that. Everyone will speak their own native language, but on top of that, there will be a Type 1 language, probably English. There's also going to be a Type 1 culture and a Type 1 political system as well. You can go anywhere on the planet Earth and show people pictures of two individuals that are instantly recognizable by any human, Madonna and Arnold Schwarzenegger. In other words, we're talking about Hollywood movies. We're talking about rock and roll, rap music, blue jeans. That's going to be the planetary culture of the planet Earth. And what is the Internet? The Internet is the beginning of a Type 1 telephone system. That's all it is. And so this transition is perhaps the most important transition of all time. Some people don't want it. They fear this transition because this transition is to a planetary civilization tolerant of many cultures. These are the terrorists. In their gut, they fear this because they know they are witnessing the birth pangs of the beginning of a new planetary civilization, and the terrorists want nothing to do with it. This transition is also the most important because it's not clear if we're going to make it. When we look at outer space, we see no evidence of Type 1, 2, or 3 anywhere. No evidence whatsoever. The mathematics say that there should be thousands of Type 1, 2, and 3 civilizations in the galaxy. We see no evidence of any whatsoever. And why is that? Because the transition from Type 0 to Type 1 is the most dangerous of all transitions. We may not make it. It's a race against time. On one hand, we have the forces of integration, the forces of tolerance.
And that's why Type 1 civilizations, like in this movie or 2, I think it might have been a Type 2, was not allowed to make contact with Type 0, which would make sense, really, which is similar to what the Day the Earth Stood Still movie was about in the end. A Warning and an Ultimatum is the title, is the subtitle of this movie, which kind of makes sense. A
multicultural fabric emerging before our eyes. On the other hand, we have weapons of mass destruction, germ warfare, nuclear warfare, also the rise of international terrorism. They are obstacles to reaching a Type 1 civilization. So in other words, perhaps they didn't make it in outer space. If one day we have starships and visit other star systems, perhaps we'll find planets whose atmospheres are irradiated, or whose atmospheres are too hot to bear life, because they did not make the transition from type 0 to type 1. Now, by the time you're type 2, you are immortal. Nothing known to science can...
Okay, so it's type 2 that he said was immortal. I thought he said type 1. Okay, so the alien in the movie is a type 2 civilization.
destroy a type 2 civilization. Even a supernova cannot destroy a type 2 civilization. They'll either move their home planet, or they'll simply stop the nuclear fires from exploding. And by the time a civilization becomes galactic, they may in fact have the ability to control the fate of the galaxy itself. By the way, if you're type 3, you will explore the galaxy not by sending Captain Kirk on an Enterprise hopping from star system to star system. That would take millions of years to explore the Milky Way galaxy. The way you do it is you would create a robot, have the robot land on a moon, it would create a factory. It would make millions of copies of itself on this moon, which is quite stable, and send these to other moons. Then each of these would create another factory. Starting with one robot, you would have 1 million, then 1 million million, and 1 million million million, until you had a sphere expanding near the speed of light, containing trillions of these robots. They would land on a moon and simply wait. Wait for a type 0 civilization to become type 1. Now, where have you seen that before? This is the basis of the movie 2001. The movie 2001 is perhaps the most authentic rendition of the encounter of a type 0 civilization with a type 3 civilization. Now,
Unless attraction, which is a type 2 civilization, being a type 0.
at the beginning of the movie, Stanley Kubrick interviewed many leading astronomers and scientists, and we laid out this scenario, that the most efficient way to colonize a galaxy is to send robots, have them land on the moon, and create a factory, and then they would shoot out and colonize other moons.
Okay. So, yeah, it didn't seem like the alien fell in love with the human lady in this movie, and I got lost at the end because there was more exoskeleton suit creatures running around. I don't know where they came from. I thought there was only one crash. Or was there more suits in that same ship? That's where I lost the plot, because I was like, I thought there's only one of them. But he wanted to leave and go home anyway, because he knew he was breaking. He knew he was breaking the law. The ending was pretty decent because it showed empathy when the alien brought the lady back to life once she died. And he wasn't supposed to use his own future technology to save the life of Type 0 because it was against his protocol of his species. There's some funny bits in the movie. I don't want to give them away. By the way, this is spoilers. The class scenes were a little odd, where the guy was talking about asteroids at the beginning. also a reference to water and how it's more energetically reviving, and he used water to revive the lady that died, and the ship needed water to rebuild itself, which has been played in a few other movies like Battle Los Angeles, where the aliens had to use water to refuel their ships, which would kind of make sense on a biological standpoint. So that's something that's reoccurring. And I think that's another thing that Michio Kaku stated a few years ago. So the less narcissistic the human race gets, the more achievable to a type 1 status civilization we become. And that's what the type 1 and 2 civilizations are waiting for, would wanting us to achieve, because it's just a developmental step in human progress. And I guess the other world had to do the same thing, otherwise they'd blow themselves up like they did in the others. Like Michio Kaku stated, you'd find the remnants of ones that didn't make it to Type 1. Okay. Overall, it wasn't a super great movie, and it wasn't a super terrible movie either. It was kind of in the middle. I'd probably give it a 6.5, maybe 7. The CG was pretty decent. Made by Russian TV company? Alright. Take care.